It started as just another heated argument on set. Loud words, flying insults, and years of bottled-up jealousy between Bambi and Rashida finally exploding in front of the cameras. But no one could have predicted how far it would go, or how bloody it would become. Witnesses say the fight escalated in seconds. A glass thrown, a table flipped, and then chaos. Screams filled the room as Rashida was slammed into the corner of a table, her face hitting hard enough to draw blood everywhere. Crew members rushed in, but it was too late. The damage was done. Ambulances were called, producers panicked, and Rashida was rushed to the ER with severe facial injuries. Doctors say reconstructive plastic surgery may be the only way to repair the damage. This wasn't just drama. This was a disaster that changed everything. The bass started first low, greedy, crawling along the floor like a rumor. Then came the lights, violet strobes cutting through the lounge like camera flashes that refused to blink. People smiled too wide, laughed too loud, and clutched their drinks like secrets. Producers hovered near pillars, pretending to mingle while clocking every micro-expression. It was one of those nights Atlanta makes when it wants to be legend part party, part performance, all pressure. Rashida felt the pressure in her jaw. The ice glass sweating against her fingers wasn't cold enough to calm it. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to be seen, to remind the room why her name still made a certain type of noise. But tension moves faster than PR, and somewhere between the photo wall and the VIP rope, she caught sight of Bambi. Bambi didn't just enter rooms. She arrived in them-height hair, a dress that threw sparks every time she pivoted. She clocked Rashida at the exact same moment. Two magnets turned the wrong way, pushing against the air between them. "Be cool," Carly whispered at Rashida's shoulder. The kind of advice people give right before things get hot. "I am cool," Rashida said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. #tension, #setup, #ATL night. A producer with a headset and a hopeful face approached. "Ladies, can we get a quick group shot?" Just energy, smiles, love for the city. He gestured toward a small crescent of couches staged like an interview never happened there. Bambi arrived first, lips glossy with a practiced half smirk. "You want love for the city," she said sweetly, "or love for the cameras?" Rashida joined, placing her clutch down with surgical precision. "Same thing tonight, ain't it?" The flash popped 1, 2, 3. Hands on hips, chin tilt, a micro-lean that reads as dominance if you're fluent in body language. It would have ended their tense tableau and 1,000 captions, except the room is a living creature. And someone had already fed it a rumor. She said you're scared to see her face to face. A voice hissed from nowhere. She said you're writing old headlines. Another voice answered. Bambi's eyes moved left. Right like she was tracking a fly she wasn't done swatting. "There's a lot of she said in here. How about you let me know what you say?" Rashida angled toward her. Not close enough to be reckless, close enough to make a point. "I say I'm not here for reruns." Behind them, the DJ lowered the volume a hair. The way DJs do when they smell content. Face off, #dialogue, #producers hover it started. Where these things always start? With pride. "You posted a lot last week," Bambi said, smile thin. Whole monologue about class over chaos. Felt pointed, if the shoe fits, Rashida replied. "But hey, walk however you want." Cute, Bambi's laugh had no warmth. "Just don't act surprised when people stop playing nice." A glass clinked down harder than intended. Heads turned. Phones drifted out of pockets, rising to shoulder height like sunflowers seeking light. A producer tried to wave them down, then thought better of it. Rashida exhaled slow. "We groan. We could keep this in our mouths or put it in our hands. You choose." For 1 second, Bambi's face softened. An exit ramp no one took. "I choose getting my respect." "What you really want," Rashida said. Voice velvet over wire. "Is attention." The room leaned in. #lines crossed, #reality beat. #hook tightens. Bambi stepped closer. "Say that again." Rashida didn't blink. "You want attention." And then like a spark finding dried tinder the noise came. A table edge scraped. Someone jostled an elbow. A drink kissed the floor and shattered into a stutter of glass. The sound made people jump that collective inhale before a storm. In the lurch, Bambi's hand brushed Rashida's wrist, small as a static shock. It was enough. "Don't touch me," Rashida said. Pulling back, "I barely don't." "Touch me." Security shifted 2 steps closer. The universal choreography of almost time. Producers mouthed, "Let it." "Breathe," which always means let it burn until we can bottle it. Bambi raised both hands. "Cool." No hands. Her eyes, though, were knives wrapped in silk. "But say I'm cloud chasing again. I don't repeat myself," Rashida said. "I chart." Someone laughed too loud. It broke the thin shell of restraint holding the night together. Bambi's hand swept out more ward-off than strike, but it nicked Rashida's clutch. Sent it skidding, lipstick and phone spinning out like marbles. Instinct pulled Rashida forward to catch what was hers. Instinct pulled Bambi forward to defend what was hers. To vectors. One collision, shoulders bumped. Heels slipped on a wet ring of condensation. And then the corner of the low table rose to meet Rashida's cheek with a dull, sick thunk. Silence fell like a curtain. # impact, #accident or not. #crowd gasp, RASHEED, a single quotes as hand flew to her face. The first thing she felt was heat, sharp and blooming. The second thing was wet. When her fingers came away red, the room's oxygen seemed to vanish. "Oh my God, get towels." Camera down, camera down. The camera did not go down. Bambi froze, shock flattening the lines of anger. Rashida. Wait, I didn't. Rashida swallowed a coppery taste and straightened, refusing to let gravity make a scene out of her. "I'm good," she said through a breath that wasn't steady. Blood welled along a jagged line at her cheekbone, not gushing, but insistent. A punctuation mark she didn't write. Carly materialized with napkins that were both insufficient and immediate. "Press, baby." "Light, light." A medic from the venue rushed over, latexsnapping.com voice doing its job. "Let's sit you down." Deep breaths. "Eyes on me." Bambi took a helpless half step. "I'm sorry, I swear, I back it up," security warned, palms out, not hostile. "Just a wall made of people. #nan graphic #injury #medics on scene." The producer with the hopeful face looked stricken, then calculating, then stricken again. "We need an ambulance," he told someone. Then into comes lockdown phones at the door. Offer statements later. No one leaves with raw footage. No one listened. Clips were already doing laps on 3 platforms. The medic dabbed, assessed, nodded to a colleague. "It's clean but deep. You'll likely need sutures. Might scar without plastics. Let's get you scanned." The word plastics hung heavier than scar. It always does. Rashida's career had survived worse storms than gossip. "Faces or resumes in this town." "I'll ride with her," Carly said. Already guiding, already mothering. Rasheeda set her shoulders. She would not cry. This night would not have that. "I can walk," she said, and did. Behind them, Bambi tried to breathe past a rising ocean in her chest. She wasn't built to faint. She was built to fight. But there is a kind of panic that doesn't throw punches, it just sinks you. She looked down and saw a constellation of red freckles spattered on the hem of her dress. Not dramatic, not cinematic, real. "Bam," a friend whispered. "Say nothing, lawyer." Now Bambi's mouth open, closed. She watched Rashida disappear through the door with 2 medics and her shadow of a friend, and for the first time all night. She didn't feel bigger in the room, she felt small. #ambulance, #ER run, #consequences. Sirens didn't wail so much as an out. The ER was fluorescent and humming, a machine built to flatten chaos into protocol. Paperwork had a way of making even fame sit down and spell its name. A nurse with kind eyes cleaned the wound with a patience that felt like grace. A resident assessed. Then the surgeon arrived, calm, confident hands that spoke before he did. "I'm Dr. Patel," he said. "I've seen worse and made better." "May I—" "Please," Rashida said, because all the other words in her throat were heavy. He traced the air above the cut. "Clean edges. We have options." If we close it tonight with fine sutures and follow with scar management, you can heal beautifully. If there's deeper damage, we'll discuss minor revision later. I don't recommend rushing into anything more aggressive yet. Translation. Carly asked tonight. We close. Tomorrow we breathe. Rashida finally let out a laugh that didn't try to be brave. I can work with that. He numbed the area short stings, a hiss, pressure, replacing pain. You'll feel tugging. Think of it as editing, not erasing, he said. The kind of surgeon who understands clients who live on camera. She stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them, cataloging the many rhythm to pin this night to something steady. Somewhere, a TV in a waiting room recapped a different show's drama. Tonight, she was the plot. She wondered how the headlines would write her victim, fighter, cautionary tale. Clickbait doesn't leave room for whole people. Hash. Sutures, hashtag hopeful plan, hashtag heal in public across town. Bambi sat beneath a shower too hot to be comfortable, letting water drum her shoulders like penance. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment again, the clutch, the slip, the sound. She pressed her palms to tile and forced herself to replay it slower, like evidence. Intention matters. So does impact. She whispered an apology to the steam, then to no one. Then to the only person who could accept it later or never. Her phone lit. Unknown number. She ignored it. It lit again. Same number. She answered on the third ring, voice small. Hello? I'm with press, the caller said. We have footage angles you may want to see before narrative locks. She hung up, breath sharp. The world didn't wait for truth. It franchised versions. Hash spin cycle hashtag media storm hashtag angles back at the hospital. The surgeon tied the last knot. You did great, he said. Minimal swelling. Keep it clean. We'll talk follow-up in 2 days. Avoid stress if you can. Carly and Rashida exchanged a look at the impossible prescription. Dr. Rashida asked, Let's be honest, scars. Everyone's scars, he said gently, but not everyone wears them the same. She nodded, something inside her settling. Then I'll wear this one like jewelry. They wheeled her to discharge. A producer texted before the wheels locked. How are you? Do you want us to release a statement of support? She typed, release nothing. I'll speak when I'm ready. Deleted it. Typed, I'm okay. Tell the truth. There was an accident. I'm getting care. More later. Hit send. Hash own the narrative hashtag.com voice hashtag more later outside. The air had finally cooled. The city hummed softer at 3 a.m., like even Atlanta needs to blink sometimes. As the automatic doors sighed open, Rashida stepped into the night with a butterfly of white tape on her cheek and a spine made of glass and steel. Carly hailed the car. Back at the lounge, lights were coming up, confetti sticking to the floor like regret. Bambi slipped out a side door, hoodie up, keys cold in her hand. She paused on the curb and looked back at the neon sign, still buzzing like a bad idea. Then she got in the car and drove the road, unspooling in front of her like a long, necessary sentence. 2 women heading in different directions. Carrying the same night tomorrow would be millions of opinions. Tonight, it was just consequences and choices, and both of them still had one left to make. The morning after the fight, Atlanta wasn't buzzing. It was roaring. Every blog, gossip site, canned social feed was consumed by one story. Rashida hospitalized after brutal fight, plastic surgery inevitable. Clips from multiple angles flooded the internet. Some showed Bambi's arms swinging forward. Others froze the moment Rashida's face slammed into the table. Even without the blood and chaos, the headlines alone were enough to turn this into the biggest scandal. Love and hip-hop had seen in years. Inside a downtown hospital, Rashida lay on a firm bed under a blanket that felt too heavy. Her cheek was wrapped in surgical gauze. Painkillers dulled the sting, but nothing could numb the anger swirling inside her. Anger at Bambi, anger at the show, anger at herself for letting it happen. She stared at the ceiling, the events replaying like a loop, the words, the shove, the impact, the warm blood on her fingertips. Carly sat by the bed, scrolling through her phone. Reading out loud, Shade Room got 1.2 million views on the clip. TMZ's Running with Reality star may need reconstructive surgery. And Twitter. Hugh. They're calling Bambi a career killer. Rashida sighed. Let them talk. They always do. Talk is one thing, Carly said softly. But this is different. They're saying this might end her contract. That you might sue. That production might shut the whole show down. Good, Rashida muttered. Maybe they should. Hospital, #aftermath, #drama explodes across town. Bambi's world was collapsing. What started as a heated argument had spiraled into a PR nightmare. She hadn't slept all night. And her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Lawyers, producers, even old friends she hadn't spoken to in years were calling to ask what happened. She's in the hospital, her manager said, pacing the living room. Word is she might need plastic surgery. Do you understand how bad that looks for you? It was an accident. Bambi snapped. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter now. Perception does. And right now, you look like a villain. Bambi sank onto the couch, head in her hands. The guilt was eating her alive. I tried to apologize. I tried. They don't care about apologies, the manager interrupted. They care about headlines. And right now, they're writing them for you, not with you. #Bambi breakdown. #backlash, #villain edit. VH1 executives held an emergency meeting. The show was on fire, and not the kind of fire that sells ads. The legal team was panicking about potential lawsuits. PR was drafting statements, and the producers. They were already rewriting this season around this chaos. Viewership is up 300% in the last 24 hours, one exec said. Because of blood, another replied coldly. Do you really want that as our headline? They debated pulling the episode. They debated cutting Bambi, but in the end, they knew the truth. Controversy sold. They'd seen scandals before, but nothing this visceral. And in the world of reality TV, blood always meant ratings. Still, they needed control, and that meant getting both women to talk on camera. Behind the scenes. #network panic. #ratings vs morals back in the hospital. Rashida's doctor entered with a clipboard and a cautious tone. We've done the scans. The good news is there's no fracture. The bad news is the cut is deep and it's going to scar. Rashida's stomach dropped. Scar? As in permanent. With standard treatment, it will fade significantly, the doctor explained. But if you want it gone completely, you'll need a minor reconstructive procedure. Plastic surgery, Carly said. The doctor nodded. It's an option. And honestly, I'd recommend it. Rashida stared at her reflection in a handheld mirror. Even with the bandages, she could see the angry red mark underneath. Do it, she said quietly. Book it. I'm not letting her take this from me. #plastic surgery, #scars, #new beginning. Meanwhile, Bambi was in a very different kind of room. An emergency meeting with the show's legal team. You're potentially facing an assault charge, the lawyer explained. If Rashida presses charges, it could get serious. But it was an accident, Bambi repeated, voice trembling. We both slipped. It wasn't. Then Rashida broke the silence. You changed my life, she said coldly. Not because of your words. Not because of your actions. Because every time I look in the mirror now, I'll see you. Bambi swallowed hard. I never meant to. You did, Rashida cut her off. And whether it was an accident or not doesn't change the fact that you did. And now I'm the one who has to live with it. #face-to-face, #explosive moment, #unforgiven. The cameras captured every tear, every glare, every word that could never be taken back. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because what happened next would change not just their lives, but the entire future of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. And this time, there would be no going back. The reunion sit-down episode went viral within hours, not because of apologies, but because of how cold and cutting it was. Rashida didn't yell. She didn't break down. She delivered every word with the calm precision of a woman who had been broken and rebuilt. Spruski and was now out for accountability. And Bambi. She looked like a ghost of herself, sitting there under the weight of 1,000 camera flashes. Every mistake she'd ever made flashing before her eyes. But if the world thought that was the end of the story, they were dead wrong. 2 weeks later, Rashida walked out of a high-end cosmetic surgery clinic in Buckhead with oversized sunglasses, a bandage still taped delicately to her cheek, and a new energy radiating from her every step. The procedure had gone smoothly. Her surgeon was optimistic. With time, he'd said, the scar will be almost invisible. But that wasn't the point. Rashida didn't want to hide what happened. She wanted to control the story. #new face, #control the narrative, #plastic surgery. The cameras followed her as she walked into a press conference, a move that shocked even the network. No one knew she planned this. No one expected her to speak publicly. But that was the thing about Rashida. She didn't play defense. She took control. I'm standing here today as a woman who's been through hell, she said to the cameras, her voice steady, powerful. I was attacked on set. I was injured so badly that doctors said I needed reconstructive surgery. And I'm here to say this isn't entertainment. This is violence. The room went silent. Even the reporters looked stunned. This industry profits off our pain, Rashida continued. It turns our trauma into ratings, and it lets people walk away without consequences. Well, not this time. I will not be silent. I will not pretend this was just another storyline. This was real. This was assault. And I am taking legal action. #press conference, #justice for RASHEEDA, #fight for change. The words hit like a bombshell. Within hours, #justice for RASHEEDA was trending worldwide. Fans flooded social media with messages of support. Celebrities spoke out. Even former castmates, some who hadn't spoken to Rashida in years, posted solidarity messages. Bambi, meanwhile, was blindsided. She had known a lawsuit was possible, but she hadn't expected Rashida to go public. Her phone blew up once again. Lawyers, crisis managers, PR strategists, do not respond. Her lawyer instructed firmly. Anything you say can and will be used against you. But I need to defend myself. Bambi shouted. She's making it sound like I attacked her on purpose. It was an accident. Intent doesn't matter anymore, the lawyer replied. It's about optics now. And you're losing. #lawsuit, #legal battle, #reputation destroyed the network panicked. Lawsuits meant bad press. Bad press meant advertisers pulling out. And advertisers pulling out meant money lost. They scrambled to mediate. Offers were made behind closed doors, settlements, public apologies, spin-off promises. But Rashida wasn't interested. This wasn't about money. This was about justice. For Bambi, the fallout was devastating. Brand deals vanished overnight. A cosmetics company she had partnered with terminated their contract. Her fan base, once fiercely loyal, split in two. Some defended her, saying Rashida was milking the situation for clout. Others turned on her completely, calling for her to be fired, canceled, even arrested. The worst blow came when VH1 suspended her from filming until further notice. #suspended. #cancel culture. #fall from grace, while Bambi's life unraveled. Rashida's star rose higher than ever. The press tour exploded. She appeared on talk shows, gave interviews, and spoke openly about the toxic environment of reality TV. This isn't just my story, she told Good Morning America. This is the story of countless women whose pain has been packaged and sold for profit. And it's time we change that. But behind this strong public persona, Rashida still carried scars, physical and emotional. Late at night, she'd stand in front of the mirror and trace the faint line on her cheek. It was healing well, but she knew she'd see it forever. And every time she did, she remembered Bambi. She remembered the fight, the blood, the betrayal, and the fact that she had trusted her once. #scars, #new strength, #never forget. Bambi tried to reach out, letters, calls, even a public apology video. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face in a clip that quickly went viral. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I've lost everything because of one mistake. Please, forgive me. But Rashida never responded. Not once. Not even a word. Because in her eyes, forgiveness wasn't owed. It was earned. And Bambi hadn't done enough to earn it. Things escalated even further when the district attorney's office announced they were reviewing the footage for possible criminal charges. The thought of going to jail terrified Bambi, and yet she knew she had no one to blame but herself. Apology rejected #criminal charges. To Latte, the reunion episode aired weeks later. It was the most watched episode in Love and Hip Hop history. Fans tuned in not for the drama, but to see the fallout. And what they saw was raw, real, and impossible to look away from. Rashida walked onto the stage looking stronger than ever, confident, composed, unshaken. Bambi sat on the opposite couch, visibly broken, her career hanging by a thread. When the host asked if reconciliation was possible, Rashida's answer was simple: no. There was no hatred in her voice, no anger, just certainty. Some things can't be undone. Some scars don't fade. And some people don't deserve a second chance. The audience erupted, some in support, others in shock. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a reality show storyline anymore. This was real life. And real life doesn't always end with hugs and forgiveness. Most watched #reunion drama. #final blow by the end of the season. Bambi had disappeared from the show entirely. Rumors swirled that she'd moved out of Atlanta, that she was working on a tell-all book, that she might even sue the network herself. But none of it mattered anymore. Her career and reputation were in ashes. Rashida, on the other hand, emerged from the chaos more powerful than ever. Stronger, wiser, unbreakable. She had turned her pain into purpose, and the world had rallied behind her. But deep down, beneath the strength and the headlines, one question still haunted her. Had she gotten justice? Or just revenge? The courtroom was packed not just with lawyers and reporters, but with fans. Some had waited for hours just to catch a glimpse of the two women whose fight had spiraled into one of the biggest scandals in Love and Hip Hop history. The cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't matter. The world was watching, and the stakes had never. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy intensified. Fans held signs reading "Justice for Rashida" and "No excuses for violence." Others defended Bambi, insisting the messages were just trash talk. Social media was split down the middle, half calling for Bambi's arrest, the other half begging for mercy. But inside, the trial continued, and it only got worse for Bambi. A producer from the show took the stand next, revealing behind-the-scenes details that stunned everyone. "We had warned Bambi to de-escalate," the producer testified. "We knew tensions were high, and we told her not to engage. But she said, and I quote, 'I'm not backing down this time.'" The courtroom gasped. Bambi lowered her head, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Producer testimony, #bombshell, #courtroom drama in a desperate move. Bambi took the stand herself. Her voice trembled as she addressed the jury. "I'm not a monster," she said. "I never wanted to hurt Rashida. I let my anger control me, and I regret that every single day. I've lost everything because of that night, my career, my reputation, my peace. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life." It was a powerful moment, raw, emotional, and real. Some jurors looked moved. Others remained stone-faced. But Rashida, she didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. She says she's sorry, Rashida said to reporters outside court. But sorry doesn't erase scars. Sorry doesn't undo pain. Sorry doesn't give me back the part of myself I lost that night. #emotional testimony, #no forgiveness, #scars remain as the trial neared its conclusion. Both sides delivered their closing arguments. The prosecution focused on accountability, urging the jury to send a message that violence, intentional or not, has consequences. The defense pleaded for compassion, painting Bambi as a flawed human being who made a terrible mistake. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. The world held its breath. And finally, the verdict was read. On the charge of assault resulting in bodily harm, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded, gasps, tears, shouts, flashing cameras. Bambi broke down sobbing, clutching her attorney's hand. Rashida closed her eyes and exhaled deeply, tears rolling silently down her face. It wasn't joy. It wasn't victory. It was relief. Guilty verdict, #justice served, #emotional moment. The judge sentenced Bambi to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management counseling. But the real punishment was the damage to her legacy. The once beloved reality star was now branded forever as the woman who scarred Rashida. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was enormous. VH1 officially terminated Bambi's contract. Sponsors dropped her. Former friends stopped returning her calls. She disappeared from public view, retreating from the spotlight she had once craved so desperately. Rashida, meanwhile, used the platform she had gained to advocate for accountability in reality television. She launched a foundation supporting women who had experienced on-set violence. She spoke at universities and industry panels, and she continued to thrive not as a victim, but as a survivor. #aftermath, #accountability, #survivor yet. Even in her lowest moments, Bambi found one small shred of redemption. At a charity event 6 months later, she quietly approached Rashida backstage. No cameras, no audience. Just to women with too much history between them. "I don't expect forgiveness," Bambi whispered, voice breaking. "But I needed to say it again. I'm sorry. I really am." Rashida stared at her for a long time, searching her face for sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "I believe you," she said softly. "But believing you doesn't mean I'll ever forget." They parted without a hug, without a handshake, just a silent acknowledgement that their lives would be forever linked by that one night. #final confrontation. #no going back, #real closure. And as they walked their separate paths, one rebuilt from strength, the other from regret, the message was clear. Actions have consequences. Even when the cameras stopped rolling, the fight that began with words and ended in blood had changed everything. Not just for Rashida and Bambi, but for an entire industry that now had to face the dark side of the reality it sold. But for both women, one final chapter remained unwritten, and destiny had one last twist, waiting. Months had passed since the courtroom verdict, but the shockwaves from that night still rippled through every corner of their lives. The once inseparable castmates were now living in two completely different worlds. Rashida rising higher than ever, Bambi fading into the shadows. Yet despite everything, the blood, the trial, the guilt, the headlines, the universe wasn't done with them just yet. For Rashida, life had shifted in ways she could never have predicted. What started as a personal nightmare had become a movement. Her foundation, scarred but strong, was gaining national attention. She was invited to speak on major talk shows, featured in documentaries, and even approached by lawmakers about creating safety regulations for reality TV productions. The scar on her cheek, once a source of pain, was now a symbol of resilience, a reminder that she had survived. And she had won. But victory didn't feel like she expected it to. There were nights when she still woke up from nightmares, flashes of that moment, the impact, the blood. And sometimes in the quiet of her dressing room before interviews, she'd catch herself staring into the mirror, wondering if she had gone too far. Did she want justice? Or had she wanted revenge? #victory and void, #healing journey, #scarred, but strong. Bambi single quotes as world, on the other hand, had completely unraveled. Her name had become toxic in the industry. No network wanted to work with her. Brand deals were non-existent. Even some of her closest friends had distanced themselves. She had moved to a small house on the outskirts of Atlanta, far from the flashing cameras and fake smiles. Therapy had become a part of her weekly routine, not for the cameras this time, but for herself. Slowly, she was confronting the demons she had spent years ignoring: her anger issues, her insecurities, her need for control. It was painful. It was humiliating. but it was necessary. Rock bottom hashtag starting over hashtag self-reflection one day. Her therapist asked her a question that stopped her cold. What would forgiveness mean to you? Bambi thought about it for a long time. It wouldn't mean forgetting, she finally said. It would mean not being defined by the worst thing I ever did. And that's when she decided she had one last thing to do, something she had avoided for months. She reached out to Rashida, not through lawyers or the press, but directly. Would you meet with me? The message read, one last time. No cameras, no producers, just us. Days passed without a response. Then, one afternoon, Rashida replied with a single word, yes, has one last meeting, hashtag closure ahead, hashtag real talk. They met at a quiet cafe just outside the city, the kind of place where no one would recognize them, where no one would care about their past. There were no cameras, no managers, no audience, just two women and the weight of everything that had happened between them. The silence was heavy at first. Neither of them knew how to start. Finally, Bambi spoke. I've gone over that night 1,000 times in my head, she said quietly, and every time I wish I had walked away. So do I, Rashida admitted. I wish I had just turned around and left. Bambi swallowed hard. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed to see you. Not to defend myself, not to justify anything, just to say I'm sorry. For the pain. For the scar. For everything. Rashida took a long sip of her coffee before answering. I used to think forgiving you would mean letting you off the hook, she said. But I've learned that forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. Does that mean? Bambi began, her voice trembling. It means I forgive you, Rashida said, tears welling in her eyes. Not because you earned it, but because I refuse to carry this weight anymore. Hashtag forgiveness, hashtag letting go, hashtag powerful moment. Then, two women sat there for hours, talking not as enemies, but as human beings, flawed, broken, and trying to heal. They talked about their childhoods, their careers, their mistakes, their dreams. They laughed at old memories and cried over the ones that hurt too much to relive. By the end of the conversation, something had shifted between them. They weren't friends, maybe they never would be, but they were no longer bound by anger and resentment. When they stood up to leave, Rashida reached out and offered her hand. Bambi hesitated for a second before taking it. Thank you, Bambi whispered. Thank yourself, Rashida replied, because now you get to start over. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag closure, hashtag life goes on months later. Both women's lives looked very different. Rashida's foundation became a national nonprofit, and she was honored with awards for her advocacy work. She even executive produced a new series focused on women's empowerment, one that prioritized safety and authenticity over drama. Bambi, meanwhile, found a new path. She started speaking at youth programs and shelters, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. Slowly, people began to see her not just as the woman who made a mistake, but as someone who was trying to be better. And though they rarely spoke again, they occasionally liked each other's posts on social media. Small gestures that said, I see you. I respect your growth. #rebuild, #redemption, #growth. The night that had once defined them no longer held power over their lives. It was part of their story, but it wasn't the end. They had both grown, changed, and reclaimed their narratives. In the end, their fight was never really about hate. It was about pain, the pain of being misunderstood, the pain of expectations, the pain of living under a spotlight that magnifies every flaw. And from that pain came growth, strength, a future they could finally look forward to. Love and Hip Hop Atlanta had seen many fights before, but none like this. None that cut this deep. None that changed lives this much. And none that taught so many people that forgiveness isn't about the past. It's about freedom. And just like that, a story born from chaos ends with something far more powerful: closure. What started as an explosive fight that left blood on the floor and scars on a face became a deeper lesson about accountability, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to rebuild your life when the world is watching. Rashida and Bambi's journey wasn't perfect. It was messy, painful, humiliating, and real. But it's that very realness that makes this story resonate far beyond reality TV. This isn't just about a fight. It's about how anger destroys everything in its path. It's about how pride can ruin careers and friendships. And most importantly, it's about how forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Rashida didn't forgive to excuse the past. She forgave so she could move forward without carrying the weight of bitterness. And Bambi didn't change to win anyone back. She changed because staying the same was no longer an option. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever struggled to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Do you believe people deserve second chances after their worst mistakes? Let's talk in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to heal too. And if this powerful story hit home, make sure you subscribe, like, and turn on notifications, so you never miss the truth behind the most shocking moments from Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. Because this wasn't just another fight. It was a transformation. And trust us, the next chapter is going to be even wilder.